right, thank you. Welcome for joining this session. It's actually very hard to compete with, so many great sessions, especially when it's like 2 hours to Google I/O. Who is looking forward to Google I/O today? So just watching what's going on in the technology. So, and this is a good thing and bad thing. The good thing is that lots of things that I say today, and I said this is going to be experimental. Hopefully today will not be experimental anymore. So because, finger crossed, they will release a stable version of these features. And the bad thing is that, well, I'm competing with better sessions probably, or like I get less chance to have more people. But let's see. Since around like 10 years ago that the first commit went to the Flutter repository, until today, quite a lot has changed. So initially it was different idea, sandboxing just two platforms, possibly iOS and Android. And then today, I'll show you how many platforms and even small devices you can support, and you can even build app with Flutter and Dart. One of the things that Flutter usually promise, and it always repeating, is like you can build beautiful, fast, productive, open means open source, and also portable. And I think that today's talk is mainly focusing on the last part, the portable, as well as how fast you can create quick applications, supporting different platforms with minimum effort. I will cover lots of topics, including talking about the built-in widgets, how they're going to help you to build application faster, and how Flutter provide that to you, what kind of widgets we have. What if you want something that it does not exist? Can you create it yourself? And what if you want to actually paint something that requires literally an artist to paint, but with code? We're going to talk about custom graphics and animations, those that are out of the box and those that you need to control. We're going to talk about variable fonts and how Flutter is supporting and how it will help you to prototype faster, and even getting your design with any kind of platform if you're using, such as Figma or Adobe XD, to code as fast as possible. And we're going to go to a little bit of more advanced topic at the end, shader topics, what they are and how it works, what you can do, especially in Flutter with shaders. And then I'll talk about small and big devices, show you some demos, how Flutter can run on all of them. And then at the end, we're going to talk about very tiny devices. So whether Flutter can run on that or not, we will see, and we'll see the challenges and how you can overcome. So let me introduce myself. My name is Majid. I am a Flutter GD, Google Developer Expert, and I'm also head of DevRel at Inverse, a company that is doing lots of open source, especially maintaining Flutterfire, which is a Firebase SDK for Flutter. And I'm also one of the community lead, Flutter community lead. I do a lot of community activities, and this is also one of them, speaking at conferences. But enough about me. Let me go quickly through the presentation. But let me ask you one question. How many of you have done Flutter? OK, that's the perfect audience I want. So almost no one. Here is the things. You come to an idea, like your designer give you an idea. You're going to come to a dribble. Maybe you want to just prototype something very fast. You come to this page and you see, OK, I want to build this as fast as possible. Then let's see how Flutter is going to help you. I want to actually walk you through to the design and see how you should think about this design when it comes to building an app with Flutter. So if we start from the top, then we're going to start with just an app bar. Usually it's a very typical, scenario for many mobile applications. Then you're going to have this text in the center, and maybe you have this button with an icon there. You come down and you have this text a little bit bigger, and this one right after that, some dots. Possibly this is like a cursor or something, and a button. And interestingly, these are all stacked upon each other. So I have text, arrow, some circles, and then a button. The way that I'm explaining right now, like if I now want to say it in English, then I have also a column of a couple of different, UI elements here. Typically, each of them in Flutter is a widget. That's what we call it, widget. What Flutter does is just creating a widget tree for you. You can just compose different widgets, even create your own widget. And at the end of the day, you will create a page. You can navigate through the pages. Even a page is a widget. So you can think about it this way. But let's go back to like our design one more time. Here. So first of all, Flutter usually comes with lots of built-in widgets. Everything that I mentioned right now, like text for rendering the text, button, a column for layouting your page, the app bar, these are all built-in widgets that Flutter supports. You can see a big list of widget catalog on Flutter documentation. Not even me, after working 5 years with Flutter, I don't remember all of them. I need to look at this documentation. The list is huge. So, but how does this help? Okay. Let's see. It was a full screen. There you go. All of these built-in widgets are here to just quickly help you scaffold your project, build your layout, compose them together, and create what you want for this particular design. Like quickly, Flutter gives you, as you can see here, if I want to just stack two texts like this way, I have a column widget, which, as we said, it's just generating a tree, a widget tree. So then it requires, well, some children or maybe a child. Usually, the widgets are requiring you a child or children. So you can go ahead and then have two texts here, which they will come right after each other. So the widgets are not particularly for rendering something, but also for layouting your applications. So then literally in Flutter, we say everything is a widget. That's the reason behind it. It just helps us to do whatever we want. And here in this case, like we have a button here. The button looks a bit different from what we have in Flutter built in, because Flutter built-in widgets, the theming part of it usually built on top of material design. We have different design system as well. I will explain about that. But the look is different, as you can see. Well, you get a button. That's perfect because you get everything with a button, like a gesture detection, all the different gesture. If it's a click, tab, mouse over, whatever. You don't really need to build that at all. But then the problem is it comes with that design. But then Flutter comes with a solution that we say theming. You can customize the default theming in any way that you want. Here is an example that I put it here. In fact, for rapid prototyping, you don't even need to do all of this yourself. If you need a generalized, let's say, theming, you can even use libraries such as this one. I have an example here to show you how it may look like. Even though you're going to have, this is a web application, by the way, that I just placed it here. A Flutter web application. You can even get that on mobile if you want, or desktop. Simply can change the theming and everything is going to change, as you can see. Even you can have light and dark. That comes out of the box, by the way, by Material Design. But with this library, you can quickly get into theming of of the Material Design for your application. Okay, I'm very sorry about I put all of this to an iframe to just have it easier, but as soon as they connect the HDMI, it just gets full screen, so I can't really move forward. I just need to, yeah. If you want to think about theming, is that you have a theme data in Flutter where you provide all the details, and that detail is going to be applied to any widget that you are going to use. As an example, if you want to define like a headline small, there are some default ones, of course, you can modify them. Then you can go ahead and add it to theme, whatever you want, fonts, etc. And then you get that from the theming into your text. You can think of a theming as a style sheet. So you can keep everything in that theming. Here's another example that I have here. So I have a button. Well, I want this button instead of being purple or whatever is the default for material, accent color, I just want it to be black all the time for my light mode. Well, I can define it here and I just say, hey, the background color always be black. But the question comes here, what if, well, that's a default button. What if I want a little bit different styling here? So for example, I just want to have two corners of this with border radius, but the two corner, I don't want the border radius. That's something that I need to open my live coding editor. So this is an online editor for writing Flutter application and seeing that live on browser. So even it works offline, so you can just open zap.run, that's the name of the project. And then you get this project, you can even share that with anyone. So the link is even shareable. That's something that I actually want to talk about it by end of these talks. So the power of a platform that enables us to do such a things in browser, and at the same time, something else on small devices. So here is an example that I mentioned right now about it's very bad coloring. Let's change the color to something else. So this button right now has a different styling, as you can see. It's just because in my theming, or I can actually create a custom button because Flutter gives me a container that is very flexible to decorate it in any way that I want. So then I can create a button that is looking like whatever the design is. And here is just an example code here for demonstration. Just a container, give it like a box decoration, and just say I want top left and bottom right have a border radius. That's the way you create your custom widget. You can compose, you can even utilize this built-in widget and return based on your design, customize it in any way that you want. So, well, for rapid prototyping, of course, fonts are very important. And one more thing that is very important is that I want to change quickly and I want to see the result quickly. The fonts, though, you can add it to your static asset in Flutter. That's not a problem. It will be loaded. Well, and if you want to use like Google Fonts, which is probably popular in many applications, there is already a package provided by Flutter team where you can simply modify your fonts in your application. The reason I put this demo here is just to show you, when you change these fonts right now, look at the changing of the font on the left side in the demo app bar. It's actually changing right away. I change, save, I see the results. That's what we call it in Flutter hot reload. Essentially important for rapid prototyping. So you want to create something very fast, and that's what you get. You change your design, you see the result immediately. But what if you change the state or you change an entire class? We're talking about different platforms. Compiling your application, it will take time. Running the application will take time. Just imagine how many of you are iOS developer or Android developer, or even have done any desktop on Linux maybe. It just takes time to save, and you need to wait maybe a minute or two just to Xcode to see that Xcode is building again. But in Flutter, we have a concept called hot restart, where it just doesn't rebuild everything again, just rebuild the Dart part of it, or the Flutter framework part of it, which is quite fast. Within like 2-3 seconds, more or less, you get the result back. But then, well, we're talking about Flutter cross-platform. That means, well, it will run on different platforms. You're talking about a button, or in this case, a switch. If I use a built-in, then I get an Android-style switch. That's not really what I want. I want my application to be adaptive. Adapt the host that is running. Well, what can I do? There are different ways, again, in Flutter that you can do that. One is that Flutter comes with supporting other design systems, such as Apple Human Design System. Or for Linux or Windows, there are community efforts to bring all of those native looking like of the platforms to Flutter as well. While you can do that, I think there is an important thing here that I have to show you is you can use built-in feature for adaptability. Here is an example. I have a switch button on the top. I think it's a little bit small, isn't it? Okay. I have a switch button here where that is going to be the first one to be rendered. And that is going to just render the default material design looking like on Chrome, let's say. But what if I want this to be adaptive to my Mac and showing like a Mac style button? And that's exactly what I get with just one constructor here, calling a constructor on a switch that is adaptive. Essentially what it does, it just detects a platform, says like, if this is iOS, render another switch. If this is Linux, do this. If this is... But you don't really need to think about it. Again, helping you to rapidly develop your application. But now question comes, well, I now see built-in, then I already go and I build my, let's say, custom widgets, composed other widgets that I wanted, but then what if I have a design that is very customized, like it doesn't fit into any of these widgets at all? I cannot do anything. I have to draw it myself. And that's exactly what gives you Flutter. So you have a canvas with this different screen size, and this is just an idea how the basic of canvas means. And that's the pixel here, and that's you as an artist. You get a custom paint widget where you can actually create your own painter, which means you can paint literally programmatically anything that you want on this canvas. I want to give you an example right away afterwards. The logic is very simple. The simplicity is here that you need to just call the paint, where is that on that class, and just say what you want to do in which color and where. So here is where I say, I want actually to draw a line. I said a path. I want to create a path just from 0 on the top left to the bottom right. That's technically what I say right now to this function. And that's going to give me this line. So now you can imagine, after this, I'm going to show you a demo. Now you can imagine what you can do. You get a whole lot of different way to paint. If you want a curve, if you want a cubic, or etc., etc. It's you, this canvas, pixels, go ahead and do whatever you want. And here is an example I want to show you, a demo. This is built in Flutter, run on all platforms, but this is web right now because my slide's on web. So this is the type of things you can do with custom painter and, of course, combining them with animations. When I say painting, that's a type of painting I'm talking about. But we talked about animation. Right now, we have the painting widgets. Then we need animation to quickly, like, maybe impress our product owner, our customer, clients, and do something. You get a lot of widgets built in again into Flutter, which gives you this animation or running these animations, which technically means we call them in Flutter implicit, means it's taking care of everything that it should be taking care. You just need to call these method or these widgets to just run an animation. Like if you want to just animate a container or a text that we have, like want to make it bigger or smaller, depends on the state, changing the state of that text, you can do that as well. So let's take a look at the example here on the animation, the implicit animations. So this is an animation you get for free, and as simple as calling this widget and saying how long this animation should take, and possibly all the other styling that you want to do. And what I'll do here is I just every second I change the height and width of this container. And based on the changing of this, the animation is going to change. So, well, you have even more options. You can even have like different curves here and do this kind of styling. Like there are many options that you can just play around with Flutter. But then what if you want to control your animation? Like that's the custom painter. You just paint something and you want to drag, and after changing the drag, you want to change the position and animate it. What you can do, you can use animation controller. That's what we call it, explicit animation in Flutter. You control what you do. There are different ways you can control. Again, I'm not going to go through all of them because I don't expect you that you have not coded with Flutter go ahead and understand this, but I want to show you like where the possibilities go. There are lots of opportunities here that you can do as quickly as possible because it's already given to you. I want to move on to the variable phones. Who knows what is variable phones? Technically, variable phones are the type of phones that gives way more flexibility to designer to design. Standard phones, the phones that we know, they come with like different weight or different size and so on and so forth. But variable phones comes with a lot of different options. You can change the size of even like with the same font, you can change the height of a letter, or you can, as a developer, the designer can design, but as a developer, programmatically, you can handle these variation. Here's an example that is running right now. And Flutter support that out of the box again. You just need to pass a font variation to your text style to say what of those options you require and in which value. So usually you get these options from your designer, from the documentation of the design of that font, but then you can programmatically manipulate that. But let's get to another point. One of the things that is very common, again, using Flutter is, and the initial talk was based on that, rapid prototyping, but since I proposed the talk until today, lots of things has changed. So I changed my title, and I wanted to show you more of those new things that is coming. And here is one of those, like you have plugins right now, different plugins, different ways that you can connect it to your design system, asking your designer to do the design, and with just maybe a few steps, convert it to a Flutter application or a Flutter widget. So one of the good thing about, one of the best tools out for handling those kind of things is actually this library or this platform widget book, where it helps you to create a catalog of your widgets. Well, essentially, you have a design system probably. You're going to create a catalog of the widgets to manage the difference between the design. And even if you can hook it to your, let's say, CDCI, you get an automatic preview. You get a difference between the design and the code. You can approve or reject. You create a catalog here. So this is very similar. If you're coming from web, and especially front-end web background, this is actually a storybook. Anyone has done a storybook before? This is a storybook for Flutter. When it comes to, again, going beyond one platforms, then it comes another aspect, and that is responsive design. So again, Flutter gives you a canvas where you get on each screen the size of your design. So then you can properly create your layout based on the size of the design. And Flutter gives you as an option. So you can get the size, and then you can react to that size. And that's actually how it works. Like the way that you even build for a web, not today, maybe with grid system and etc. is a bit easier, but a little bit older time, we had media queries. We still have media queries, I believe. So we have media queries in web. You said from this size to this size, I want to do this. And this is what you do also in Flutter. The difference is that, well, on web right now, the web that we know we do with DOM, but Flutter gives you canvas instead. But well, let's get to a little bit more advanced topic here, shaders. Anyone has done shaders? Do you know what is shader? Can someone explain what is shader?
Programs that run on the GPU.
Correct. In short, exactly what he said. So programs that run, well, you can paint something in your screen, but they run not on the CPU, but on GPU. So, well, and the language that is usually used for creating shaders is just GLSL, and you need to just get familiar with that. I'm not even an expert on that, but I want to show you a website that you can play around. These are the Flutter application on desktop. This is not web. This is a video, by the way. So I made this video. And you see what you can do with Flutter. And because the shaders are running on GPU, Flutter can keep up still running this application with 60 FPS. So that's an example on the left side where you see you can have those kind of ripple effects in the entire application. So if you want to play around with shaders, there is a website named Shader Toy. This is exactly the shader code that you see. Well, you get this shader, you compile it, and then you load it in Flutter, and Flutter will run it for you, right? There might be sometimes different shaders you need to play around and maybe change slightly, but usually that's not the case. You get these shaders and your designs, and you can just load them on Flutter. If you really want to play around with shaders and see how far you can go, this is a website that you can take a look. But then let's see how shader works. Again, as I said, well, the shaders come. You can even write shader yourself. That's also supported, but either you can load them or you can use, you can update your shaders via via fragment shader API. So sometimes, depends on how many, what kind of shaders you are loading, but then that is going to be just loading these shaders and it's going to work. But sometimes you want to change the state, you want to get some effect, like the repel effect that I showed you in the previous slide. All right. Let's get to now another topic, screens or platforms. This is a Wear OS for Wear Watch, Samsung Watch, and others. And this is a Flutter application right now running on that tiny screen. This game is also built by Flutter. So, well, now we're getting into different platforms. So far, we know, or we have known together, that Flutter supports 6 platforms out of the box: Linux, Windows, Mac, web, Android, and iOS. But now I'm talking about another operating system. And we see that it's running on that operating system. Another example would be this one. This is an Apple Watch. And you are communicating via your Apple Watch with your Android. You're running Flutter right now into your Apple Watch. These are not officially supported by Flutter, though it is possible. I'll show you quickly how it is possible. Let me show you one more example here. This is an Apple TV. And the application is Flutter. And as you can see, the remote control even controlling the application and taking some action into your Flutter application. These are all possible because of the way that Flutter is architected. I'll show you quickly. But before that, there is, for all of these platforms, when it comes to the official support platforms, the 6 ones that I mentioned, usually everything is supported out of the box, or you get good packages, either from the team or from the community. But when it comes to the other platforms that are not officially really supported, you get good packages to support what you need, but you have some challenges. Imagine the Apple TV. If you want to run Flutter on an Android TV, it's a little bit easier, by the way. It's just because Wear OS and Android TV, let's say, especially Google TV, they're running Android, which is very similar to Android as a mobile that we know, operating system. But when we're talking about iOS, watchOS, iPadOS, and tvOS, they are, even though they are sharing some common things, they are not the same. Like literally it takes time to build an app for watchOS compared to iOS. That's why when I said official support, and that's one of those, like You have an Apple TV and you have an Android, and you have two different remote controls, two different type of gesture. Then how can you support them? You want to build an app right now, like Netflix, let's say, that runs on web and all the platforms, also on the TV. Then how can you make that happen? Well, let's take a look at an example here. So this is an architect of a Flutter, a high-level architect. It's more in depth. I just put this one, which is simpler. Technically, you have 3 layers in Flutter framework, where the top layer is what so far I have shown you, the Dart layer and all the widgets, rendering, and etc. A layer underneath is essentially engine, where is kind of taking care of everything that we are writing in the framework, passing down and making sure that it's going to be compatible with the platform. And then we have the embedder, which is sticking them together to the platform. Why you can run Flutter on all of these platforms that I mentioned is just because of that engine. You can literally take out this engine. It's an open source project. You can even right now go to that link that I put it here and just download the engine. And that's because of this, it makes Flutter very portable. There are, in fact, right now, engines ported from Flutter. They are essentially going to be Flutter. You can add your own customized things that you want, and Flutter doesn't support for that particular, let's say, OS. There are some attempts in the community for cars screens, BMW, Toyota. They're actually, those are also open source. You can just search and see how it works. They took this engine and they just added what they wanted, and then they had the Flutter, like the top of that, again back to it. So they could build their own kind of customized Flutter. So another thing that is very important to know, then how Flutter then communicate with, these platforms. You're talking about so many different platforms. The way that you need to communicate is going to be different. So essentially, there are 3 ways. And one of them is, which is like, this is the, it was built into the platform from the day one. That's platform channel. So if I want to explain simple, it's just open a channel between your framework, the layer that you're writing Dart code, and then a channel to the native part, whatever host is that. So in this case, iOS and Android, it just opens up that channel. You need to serialize and deserialize. This is one of the downside of this, but you serialize and deserialize your communication, and then you pass over this communication, which is usually even asynchronous. It's always asynchronous. So, well, meaning for the Wear OS and watchOS, I was clicking on something, or maybe Apple TV, I had a remote. Then how does it work? I open an open channel. I check on the native when I change the remote, what is like the output, or what kind of function I'm getting, or what kind of event. I just listen to that, open this channel with Flutter. Whenever that happens, I just pass the message to the Flutter layer. And Flutter will understand then, this is, for example, up. Click on the remote control. Or maybe this is a crown, like increasing, decreasing the volume, or etc. Simply, you can communicate with platform. This is one way. Another way is Dart FFI, or foreign function interface, where essentially allowing you to load libraries such as, or C libraries potentially, and then start calling C functions from the Dart layer. Very quite common in many languages having FFI, and if those languages support like Rust and Go and etc., you can actually start communicating with Flutter. There is one more thing which is very new. In fact, just 30 minutes ago, it's now in the stable version of Dart. I checked my Twitter and I saw that they released Dart 3. It was preview, beta, but now it's stable. You get a direct platform library interrupt. What it means is that in Dart, you call a native function, and Dart will actually call that native function for you. You don't need FFI, you don't need platform channel, you don't need anything. You have a function available in native, you call it from Dart. Well, I made it very simple. It's not as simple as that, of course. But this is a new way that is introduced to Flutter. There is an example here where you get a connection between an iOS and Health Kit without having any platform channel or anything, just directly calling some of the APIs function directly from Dart. I put the example here if you want to take a look later. And last part of these slides, getting to the tiny, tiny devices. I think you can imagine how small is this device. RISC-V CPU architecture is around for maybe 10 years, I guess. But recently, it's becoming more and more popular. It's a standard architecture that is open source. And it is designed for low energy power, devices and high performance, like having these type of small devices here. So what you can do, this is not a RISC-V, by the way, this is a Raspberry Pi, which I guess many of you know. Well, as developer, at least you've heard about Raspberry Pi. And the newest version is version 4, that you can run Linux. Ubuntu is supporting Raspberry Pi. As soon as you have Linux on Raspberry Pi, well, what you can do, you can build a lanyard maybe with Flutter, a digital lanyard that's natively going to be running on the Raspberry Pi. That's an example of Raspberry Pi is, well, probably the simplest here when it comes to IoT and Flutter. But what if you want to do such a thing? On that very tiny, small RISC-V devices, you want to interact with this device and just maybe show something. That is actually built in Flutter. So that's what I'm talking right now. Because Dart now supporting RISC-V, RISC-V also comes with different type of architecture for the CPU. I think the 2 or 3 are most important. Well, I'm not also very familiar with the hardware stuff, but the 2 very top or high level of standards are already supported in Dart. And because of that, Flutter can also support this kind of design. But is Flutter good for designing such a things? The answer is maybe yes or maybe no. I mean, it's crazy to see such a things there, right? But do you really need to use Flutter for building such a things? Well, the no is because Flutter is tend to be for like bigger screens where you have lots of pixels, not for these tiny screens that they are just having monocolor and a small, very small and low density of the pixels. But well, yes, it's just because it gives you a lot of things out of the box. You don't really need to think how to run that because it will run with just some efforts, minimal. And the way that Flutter, you can build Flutter application, like API-wise, because it's declarative, how you can create everything as a widget. It's very easy to understand. You can rapidly create it. You can even get rapid hot reload and just test everything out. Maybe yes, it just makes sense. Of course, let me tell you something, a boring two words that every architect usually tell you, and that is it depends, right? So I've been software architect for like a couple of years, and I learned if everyone asks me, should I do this or not, the answer is, it depends. And that's actually the answer literally for this one. Should you use Flutter for building such a small app for that screen? It actually really depends on your use case. This is just an experiment to just show that it's possible, but whether it's you should do it or not, that's a different story. But I have to warn you that it's not straightforward. It's not like you just go to Flutter, write, and say compile to a tiny device, and it just works. It's not like that. You definitely, as I showed you for the crown on the watch and also for the remote control, there's always something that you need to take care. And if there is no package there to support those tiny things, then you need to create that as an engineer. But here's the thing. It is possible. That is what I wanted to show you today, that how far you can get with just one platform. The good thing is that you're writing in one language, you share a lot between different platforms. That's the beautiful part of it. But does it fit in any scenario? It depends. I can't tell you to use Flutter for any single solution or problem that you have. That's not a solution for everything. But now you know how far you can get with Flutter. Now maybe you can think about it. If you want to play around more with Flutter, especially widgets, here is a link that I put it here. And also check out the docs. And today, in fact, in an hour, is Google I/O, the keynote, and it will start. And this is I'm not sure if you have seen it already, but this is a game that it was announced, I think yesterday or 2 days ago, for Google I/O 2023. And this is built fully in Flutter. You can check it out in different browsers. You can see how it works. And it's very nice to explore. And this is also open source. You can learn a lot from it. All right. So we're coming to this question. Is there any screen out there? And if CPU is supported for Dart, can you build an app with Flutter for it? Yes, you can. So essentially, or eventually, Flutter will run everywhere. And that's actually one of the goals of Flutter, to manage all the pixels on different screens. That's one of the goals of Flutter. Thank you very much for listening. I hope it was lots of demos with inspiration for you. I do not expect to remember everything, but I want the takeaway is now you see how far you can go. So go ahead and just try out Flutter and see with any kind of hobby that you have. Maybe you want to build an app, or you want to just build a Raspberry Pi IoT device, or maybe a lanyard with a small device. Give it a try, see how cool it is. Slides are there, and you can also follow me on internet with this handler almost everywhere. I'm pretty active. If you have questions, now I have 2 minutes left. And if you also have questions later, you can always come back to me, either on social media or now. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for your presentation. Yeah, I have to be honest, it's not my area of study, but I found it interesting. I just have one question, specific question, which is regarding some smartphones like Samsung Z Fold, Galaxy Z Fold. Are there any new strategies to deal with those kind of smartphones with flexible screens. Do you know
You mean
anything about it?
the foldable devices?
Yes.
Flutter already support that. You have a hinge widget in Flutter. It's out of the box supported. You just use it and it just covers both screens.
Okay, so it's already...
It's already solved and it's already built in.
Okay, thank you very much.
In fact, the contributor to this project in Flutter was Microsoft because of their, what is it, Surface? Surface.
Surface, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Question? It's either too clear or too boring. I hope it was inspiration for you, and you can just learn later. I'm happy to see what you can do with Flutter. Just send it to me, and I will also amplify it everywhere in the world. So I'm pretty active in Flutter community. Thank you very much again. I'll stand here if anyone wants to ask private question or anything else. I'll answer here in this corner. Thank you.